to do a tier ranking because I've been loving doing tier rankings, and today we're having tier ranking of all the kind of TikTok / online recommendations that I've received over the last few years to read, and these are split up into either individual books, so if I read an individual book and I have an opinion about it. I also have some full series because sometimes I just feel the same about every single book in the series. There's no point of me having to move all of them into the same category. And then I also have authors, full authors. So it might not be the same series, but it's just all books by the same author. Doesn't mean that I read every single book by the author, but it's just what I think about the author. But I've just got the books in the tier ranking. I've added all the pictures in. I'm going to screen record, and I'm just going to give you guys my opinions on what I've read so far that's been an online recommendation, whether it be BookTok or BookTube. It could be in the last year, in the last 2, in the last 5. I went through my Goodreads and I basically just tried to go as far back and just see what's been recommended to me. Started recording now. I get so paranoid. I'm like, am I actually recording? Because imagine if I just wasn't, okay? How embarrassing would that be? My tier ranking is split up into 6 different tiers. Then first, number one is Chasing This High. When I finish this book, I want to reread it immediately, or I have reread it. I chase the high. Once I finish that book and I've reread it, I wait until a next book of this caliber comes up. Okay, these are my Chasing This High forever books. Every day I'll think about them once a day. When I'm just reading a different book, I'm thinking about that book because I'm chasing that high. Then I have Good For You. Good for you. Whoever recommended this, whoever the author of this book is, good for you, because this is a good book. It's just like a solid, like, good for you, good for everyone involved in this situation. Then we have Shouldn't Reread. Now that doesn't mean the book is bad. It just means I'm not going to reread it because my opinion on it could change massively. Either way, really, but it could go down in ratings. And then we have its own category. Now this is like bang in the middle basically of the tier ranking, but it's called I Was Ovulating, which basically just means I picked up a smutty recommendation because I was ovulating, and what I thought about it in that moment might not be what I think about it when I'm in my luteal phase or when I'm just not in that state of mind. They have no comment. I will in fact comment on it, but like in reality, like no comment, because I might offend some people. And then we have the final one. I was going to call it Jail, but actually I'm calling it What Possessed You to Recommend This. And if you recommended this, or if you like these books, I'm sick of giving disclaimers. Why does everything need a disclaimer? But here's the disclaimer. Like, this is my ranking, right? This is my ranking. Well, if you have your own ranking, you can do whatever you want with that. You can even film a YouTube video about it. But this is my ranking. This is my Barbie dream house, not your Barbie dream house, okay? So this is going to be my rating. And that's the disclaimer. End of. The first book, now this is in like a random order. And now you might be wondering, why do I put down some authors as just like authors, or some series as series, but then some series have split up? It's because I have different, how do I even explain this? This makes sense in my mind, right? So like, for example, to me, all of Lucy Foley's books probably have the same rating in my mind, and they are the same vibe in my mind. So I would just end up putting them in the same ranking. However, The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo and Daisy Jones and the Six, I'd have different opinions about, if that makes sense, right? Like, or I'm just gonna put Chestnut Springs as its whole series because I think about the same thing about Flawless as I do about Powerless. Like, the ranking might be 1 star off or like half a star off, but in general, I think the same about all 5 of those books. So that was the vibe. Don't kill me. Okay, so Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, I'm going to put immediately into Chasing This High. I think when I finished that book, I thought, wow. Any book that comes after this, don't compete where you don't compare. I mean, since then I have found books that I like more, but in the moment, I was like, oh, I am chasing a high here. This is gonna... I like binged it. Like, you know the idea of binging a book? Sometimes you just don't. Like, sometimes you're reading a book, you're like, this is good, but I am going to put it down to go live my life. With this one, I was like, oh, I need to sit down and I need to devour this thing. Okay, so that's what I thought. I have All Roads Lead Here, which in the grand scheme of things is actually quite an underrated book. People recommend this for like the slow burn girlies, the people that love a long, beefy romance book that is well developed relationship wise. It's not like a love at first sight, it's just like a well developed book. There was actually a lot of plot just outside of the romance as well, a lot of character development. I actually think it's like a good for you. Like, in the moment I wasn't thinking, oh, I'm going to chase this high forever, but I just thought, wow, like, good for you. Good for whoever reads Mariana Zapata books. And since then I haven't read another one of her books. I think it's just such a time commitment. I think that's what's been scaring me, but good for you. Like, good for Mariana for this, good for everyone that recommended this book and everyone that read it, and good for me for reading it. I thought it was a great book. I don't know about her other ones, but this one, good for you. Then we have Boys of Tommen, the series. Okay, so I finished the first book, which is Binding 13, and then the second one is Keeping 13, which I'm in the middle of reading right now, but I'm reading other things because I'm in a bit of a reading slump, so I'm just trying to read as many books as I can at the same time just to see what sticks. Okay, now, this one is complicated because actually I find it really cringy, and actually I think it's a mid-series. And everyone's overhyped it. They're like, this is the best found family, this is the best character development, this is the best everything, and I think it's just quite mid. The writing is okay, and that's not always what I seek out. I don't seek out like the best piece of literature ever, but the writing is mid. The characters are okay. In reality, the main character, now I don't even remember her name, you know, the one whose POV we're in, Shannon, she's insufferable, actually. She's cringy, she's a pick-me, she's weird. I'm not a massive fan of her. Johnny I'm fine with. He's like the love interest in the first 2 books. But there's something about this series that keeps me coming back, because I actually genuinely thought halfway through the first book that I would not continue the series, and I was about to DNF the book. But there was something that was keeping me locked in, and I'm now reading the second book, and I just feel like I will finish the series, but it's not going to be like a satisfying, wow, like I'm so glad I did that. It'll actually be in spite of my own feelings. So I'm just going to put that into I was ovulating. There's actually not any smut in the first one, but for some reason that feels like it fits there. It feels like it's like my alter ego is enjoying that one and not the clear-minded Angelika of the everyday. I hope that makes sense. Then we have the Off-Campus series. Is that the Off-Campus or is that the Briar U? Oh, that's Briar U. Let's just do Off-Campus and then Briar U. Off-Campus is a good for you. You would think that I would put it into I was ovulating. I could technically also put it into shouldn't reread, because maybe my opinions on it will change. But I feel like at the time, I devoured the books. I read them all in one go, like one after the other. I actually really, really enjoyed them. I loved the found family actually in those more than what Boys of Tommen is producing for me. I loved the relationships. I felt like every plot was distinct, but it all linked together. There were some weaker points and some stronger points, but in general, I felt like it was just like a well-written series, and it introduced me to the like found family, following a bunch of different POVs and one friendship group type of book, and I actually really enjoyed it. Now, would I reread it now? Maybe. And would my rating stay the same? Probably. So I feel like I'm just going to put it into good for you. Like, I feel like at the time that was a good recommendation, and despite, like, I could read it even when I'm not ovulating, and I feel like I would still enjoy myself. Now, Briar U, on the other hand, I was definitely ovulating. I feel like I was chasing the same high from the Off-Campus series, and it just didn't deliver. Because even while I was ovulating, I could tell that this series just didn't hit the same as the first one. The characters were meh. It didn't really all link together. There's no found family. Like, I actually, from book 1 to book 2, I can't name you any of the side characters. Like, I just don't care. And then they come up in the next book and you're like, oh, there you are, I guess. And so I've read the first 2 books in the Briar U series, but not the last 2, and I've actually sold them now. They also are reprinting the books into that format. So I've got these from the Off-Campus series, but these haven't made it to the UK yet, as far as I'm concerned. So I've just sold all my other ones from the previous edition, and I might buy these at some point and then give them another crack. But right now, they're in the I was ovulating bit of life. Now we've got caught up here. I've actually got Mile High and The Right Move separately, so I'm just gonna go from the first one. Mile High was a good for you. I feel like it's just like a well-written, well-developed book. It's a romance between a hockey player and his flight attendant. She like flies the private jet for the season, and yeah, they get together. It was a bit too long, a bit too wordy. But overall, I felt like it was a good recommendation. Like, good for us for reading it, good for you for writing it, good for the recommendation. Like, I just felt like it was just a good, solid, like, yeah, that makes sense, romance, boom. But then we have The Right Move, and I've been chasing this high since. Inject it into my veins is what I think about this book. I'm actually rereading it currently. I am 50% through the book because I've been in a reading slump, and I just thought, let me get back to what works. And this worked for me. It is a basketball player and like his sister's best friend romance. It's also fake dating and forced proximity because she has to live in his house because she got cheated on, and the guy that cheated on her is a massive fan of said basketball player. There is everything in this that I need injected into my veins. It is so good. The first time I read it all in one sitting. I stayed up until 5 a.m. reading this thing. Injected into my veins. I've been chasing that high since, and I'm just rereading the book, and the rating's going to stay the same because it's incredible. Even now, I'm like reading it and I'm shocked, as if I didn't read it before. Anyway, but then we have Caught Up. No comment. No comment. I ended up DNFing it halfway through. The most insufferable main female character that I've read to this day. Pick me, awful, inconsiderate, poor communication. I hated everything about that book. Made no sense to me why that even exists. Play Along is coming out like this week or something, which is the 4th installment to the series, and I will definitely be reading that because so far 2 out of 3 have been great. It's just this one mishap that we won't comment on. No comment. But I will read Play Along. I hope that I don't need too much information from Caught Up because I just don't care and I will not read it. Then we have, what is this? Oh, then we have Colleen Hoover. Shouldn't reread. I felt like when I started reading Colleen Hoover, I liked kind of what I was reading. I feel like it was really, it sucks you in, right? You can like finish a Colleen Hoover book in one sitting. It's so like, the plot is so unbelievable. You're just reading and you're in shock, and by the time you're out of the shock, you're finished with the book and you're like, oh, okay, yeah, I guess that was great. But I shouldn't reread them because then my opinion will truly change. And so like Colleen Hoover is a good like first read. Like if you read it and then you don't think about it too much, you think, oh yeah, that was alright, and then you reread it again, or you think about it again and you think that actually was not, in fact, alright. So that's what I think anyway. Then we have Daisy Jones and the Six, which is a good for you. I felt like it could have even been better than Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, but I just didn't have that same chasing the high feeling that I got from Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. Like I couldn't put Seven Husbands down, whereas Daisy Jones and the Six, I definitely did put down, even though I thoroughly enjoyed it. I don't know why that difference, but yeah, like it's just a really, really good book and everyone should read it. But for some reason, Seven Husbands was my like chasing the high book from Taylor Jenkins Reid. Then we have Done and Dusted, which I'm thinking between I Was Ovulating and No Comment. It's actually not as bad as Caught Up. I'm going to put it into I Was Ovulating. I read it pretty quickly and it was fine, but I actually don't remember much of what happened, and I found some of the moments really cringy in that book for some reason. Like I felt like there was like a lot of like cringe, and it was just like fine. But I think I was in my cowboy era, like I was just going into my small town cowboy era, and so I was just collecting these books like Pokemon, and now I know what's good and what isn't. And this one just doesn't quite make it to my good list. Like it's just like a mid book. I think I gave it like a 3 out of 5 or something like that. Then we have Elsie Silver Chestnut Springs. Good for you. I felt like this was just a good series, like a really good solid series. If you just want like a small town romance, small town, some cowboy, some like just farm vibe, like they all kind of are a different type of small town person book situation. It covers a wide spectrum of small town, and yeah, it's just great. It's a well-developed plot, like the characters overlap, the books overlap. I recommend reading them in order and reading all of them because then I feel like you get the highest like immersion possible. But yeah, it's just a good for you series. Good for Elsie Silver for doing this. Let me actually just grab Wild Love while I'm here. I'm going to put it into I Was Ovulating. I think I was chasing the high off of Elsie Silver's series, and Wild Love just didn't quite hit the same as like the Chestnut Spring series. Now I know it feels like I've put Colleen Hoover above these books, but I feel like these two tiers are like interchangeable. They don't really, it's not really quite in order. I don't want to make it sound like I'm putting like Colleen Hoover above Wild Love or Briar You, because I actually don't think that's how I would put it. I'd almost need to like put this one here and this one up here, but these two are just kind of a vibe rather than like an actual definitive 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 ranking, if that makes sense. Like it's more of a vibe. Like this one's definitely number 1. Like Chasing This High is definitely like this is number 1. What Possessed You to Recommend is definitely the last one. And then like Good For You is like good books. No Comment is like bad books. But these two are just kind of floating somewhere in the middle. So don't think that I'm putting like, just because I put Colleen Hoover up here doesn't mean it's better than Wild Love, because I actually think Wild Love is better than this. but Colleen Hoover just fits more into this category, whereas Wild Love fits more into this category. Hope that makes sense. I was reading Wild Love because I was coming off the high of Elsie Silver's Chestnut Spring series, and I was just super excited for it, and it was just an anticipated read, and I feel like it didn't live up to it, and I definitely had the feeling of like, I was ovulating. Like, if I read it now, like, it could also just go into like, shouldn't reread, but I feel like my opinion would stay the same if I reread it. It was just kind of okay, but I'm still excited for the second one, so it is what it is, I guess. Now let's go with Emily Henry. I've been chasing this high since. Every time she releases a book, I read it immediately, and then I just wait until she releases another book. I just keep on waiting, and I just chase that high, and then every book she releases is better than the one before, and so I'll just forever be chasing that high of Emily Henry. That's who I am. I'm an Emily Henry fan. If she has no fans, I'm dead. And that's for every single one of her books. So that's why I just put her down as just like Emily Henry. Is a high that I keep on chasing. Then we have Every Summer After, which once again was a high that I chased. I read it right after I read Happy Place, and both of those made me cry, and they were both 5 stars, and both of those I couldn't put down. I highlighted, I did the whole thing, and I've just been chasing that high since. I just heard that Carly Fortune's second and third book that she's put out aren't actually that great, and so I feel like I'm just terrified to read the second and the third book, just in case, because I don't want to be angry and disappointed. So I'm just forever going to be chasing that high, I guess. The Family of Liars, but I read We Were Liars first. So We Were Liars, I'm just going to put under shouldn't reread, okay? I read it when I first moved into my apartment, the one I lived in before. And while I was moving in, I was listening to a lot of audiobooks, and I felt like I was giving them a pass because they were keeping me entertained. So We Were Liars was actually a poorly written book. The ending wasn't great. A lot of people made it sound like it was going to be this revolutionary thing that I've never heard of, and it reminded me of when we used to write stories for English literature, and you'd write something like, and then she woke up, like at the end of your essay, like, and then she woke up from a dream. That was basically what this gave a little bit, and I thought it was just kind of poorly written and executed. However, I was still entertained because I was like unpacking, and I don't know, I was entertained. Okay, so I'm going to put it into shouldn't reread, because now if I reread it, I'd give it literally like a 1.5. But at the time, I just felt like it did what it needed to do in that moment. It was what I needed when I was unpacking, okay? However, Family of Liars, no comment. I had to restart that book about 5 times because I just kept on like dozing off, and then I just didn't know what was happening. And I ended up finishing it, and now I could not retell you that plot. I have no idea what happened in that book. So don't ask me, because no comment, I guess. Then we have The Fine Print, which is the epitome of... Come on, go in front there. It's the epitome of I was ovulating. I literally picked up that book just because I was ovulating, and it did what it needed to do in my mind. I was like, okay, perfect, amazing. And now looking back on it, like the plot was actually kind of shit. And that's why I'm just not looking forward to reading the other 2, because I just don't care. I don't care, but maybe I'll read them again when I'm ovulating again. Then we have Frida McFadden, who's released The Housemaid and stuff like that. I actually, ironically, haven't read Housemaid, but I've read Don't Lie and another one she had. I can't remember what it's called. But I'm going to say, so far she's a good for you. Like, I think it's just like a good, easy thriller mystery to read, and it's good as an audiobook. I haven't read Housemaid, so I can't really speak on that, but just as a whole, she gives me the vibe of like just like an easy to consume thriller. So let me actually do Lucy Foley while I'm at it. She did like the Paris Apartment Guest List, and there was another one I can't like see because my... Oh, The Hunting Party as well. I listened to all of those on audio, and I'm just going to put those under shouldn't reread. Like, I feel like they were once again good in the moment, but if I reread them now, I'd probably pinpoint a lot of moments that were quite mid. But because I listened to them on audio, and I was doing stuff, like I remember I was always like either traveling or like doing something, I felt like they were just entertaining me a lot more than maybe they would have if I was just like sat at home doing nothing. And if I had to read them physically as well, I feel like I would have given up a lot sooner. But because I was listening on audio, it was just like a fun, entertaining experience. And then we also have Lisa Jewell, who I'm actually going to put under good for you. I actually think she has really surprised me. I felt like I was expecting just a mid mid-author for thrillers, but she has surprised me. I've read like 2 or 3 of her books now, and all of them have been twisty and turny and well written, quite dark actually, and I've heard a lot of people give that criticism that they can't read her books because they're quite dark and they have this icky aura to them, but I actually really enjoy it. It's done really well, and so as a mystery author, I would actually quite recommend her. Probably the most out of all of these. I'm just going to put her in front of Freida McFadden just for continuity's sake, but all the other ones I haven't really ordered. Let me actually order them for you guys. So we have Emily Henry, and then we have Every Summer After, and then I'm going to put Right Move, and then Evelyn Hugo. For these I'm going to put Daisy Jones, Elsie Silver, All Roseate Hair, this, or maybe even like this, or like this, and then that, and then for these I'm gonna go Wild Dove, Where Are You, Done and Dusted maybe, and then that, no, like that, and then like that. Okay, they're actually in order now of how I think they are. Then we have Blood and Ash something, what's it called? From Blood and Ash, the whole series. I've read the first 2 books, and then I think I started the 3rd one and then kept on like getting lost in it, and I just dozed off. I'm going to say, what possessed you to recommend this? One of the worst fantasy series I've ever read. Like, absolutely. Oh my god. Oh, I thought I forgot the one that I actually want to talk about. One of the worst fantasy series I've ever read. It is no plot. Like, the first book was actually okay in the moment. I think, once again, I was listening to it on audio, so it was entertaining me. At the time, I had just gotten Phoebe, so I was taking her on a lot of walks and stuff, and so I feel like it was keeping me sane and entertained, and it was something that I didn't have to focus on too hard to understand. And then once you get to the 2nd book, you realise there is no plot. And then once you get to the 3rd one, you realise there really isn't a plot. And then I just don't understand how she managed to get a 4th and a 5th out of it. And now she's doing like a whole other series because there was no plot to be had. So no thank you. And I don't know what possessed anyone to recommend these books because they were all over TikTok for a bit. But then we have a good fantasy series. I feel like this is going to be so controversial, okay? Lee Bardugo released The Grishaverse, which was the 3 kind of Shadow and Bone books, and then we have Crooked Kingdom and 6 of Crows, and then we have King of Scars. Now I still haven't read Crooked Kingdom and 6 of Crows, which I actually consider the best out of that whole series, but I've read the whole Grishaverse trilogy, and at the time I literally couldn't put the books down. When I say couldn't, I read them all in like 3 days. I was going to a theme park with my friends at the time, and it was pouring outside, okay, but I still put the Shadow and Bone book in my backpack so I could read it on the way there, and it was completely like damaged by the time I got back, like falling apart because it got so wet in my backpack. I'm going to put Chasing This High, but like at the end of Chasing This High, because it was actually an amazing series at the time. I actually really enjoyed myself. I know it got a lot of hate, but I think compared to like what has come out since, like the From Blood and Ash and Powerless and stuff, I think it was a great series, and I actually want to reread it because then I can get to Crooked Kingdom and 6 of Crows because it's just going to be like a continuity thing. And I've been, once again, I already said it, in a slump. I'm trying to get out of the slump. So, oh my god, there's a hair on my head. Then we have Icebreaker. I was ovulating big time. Like, one of the smuttiest. I was heavily ovulating. Then I read Wildfire recently, and no comment. I've DNF'd Wildfire now. No comment seems to be like the DNF section. I've DNF'd it. It was kind of just, I don't know, it was just kind of cringe and boring. And I was enjoying it at the beginning. And I even talked about Wildfire in a recent video that I was just kind of starting it. And I said so far it's much better written than Icebreaker. So like I was like, oh, so far so good. Since then, it has just become boring and just cringy. And I don't know, there's just something about it that is just not speaking to me. I can't describe it. I can't explain it. For some reason, Icebreaker was so much more, like I could really dive headfirst into it, and it was just like a guilty read. It didn't have that much plot, but it was like a guilty read, okay? Wildfire though, there's nothing guilty about it. I don't care for it. Maybe I'll come back to it one day, but right now I'm just not. Then we have Jeanette McCurdy, I'm Glad My Mom Died, which I listened to on audio the day it released, and I'm gonna put it into at the top of Good For You. It's one of my favorite non-fiction books. I felt like it was super well written. You could literally tell Jeanette's tone in the book. It was a perfect non-fiction book. I had already kind of been looking forward to it because I was listening to Jeanette's kind of promo tour. She was getting a lot of podcasts to talk about it, and I was so intrigued. And so when the book came out, I literally like pre-ordered it on Audible, and I also have it in hardback because I love it so much. And yeah, so good for her. Chasing This High is reserved mainly for fiction. I feel like I don't chase the high with like non-fiction books. It just doesn't fit there, but it's at the top of good for you because like good for you, Jeanette McCurdy, for releasing this. Then we have the Magnolia Parks series. I'm also going to put that into good for you, like just above Chestnut Springs. Yeah, I love that series, and it's such a guilty read. A lot of people complain about it. It is not for the faint of heart. It feels like Gossip Girl in a book series, but I love it. And I'm waiting for the new books to come out. That's all I'm going to say on that. Then we have The Midnight Library by Matt Haig. And I actually loved this book when I first read it, but now I'm going to put it into shouldn't reread, but somewhere kind of here. Because if I reread it now, I think I'd be disappointed. But I think at the time it was the book that I needed to hear, if that makes sense. Like I needed that book in that moment, and now looking back on it, it would probably just be mediocre. But like I said, I feel like at the time so I feel like my rating from back then is going to be very different to my rating from now, and I want to leave it untouched, so I'm just never going to reread the book. And then we have Tessa Moshfegh's My Year of Rest and Relaxation, which, as you guys know, is one of my 5-star books, and I'm going to put it right above The Right Move and right below Every Summer After. I love that book. It is one of my guilty reads, and I love it. So that's all I can really say, because the book is really like weird and you can't really describe the plot too easily, but yeah, I love that book. Normal People by Sally Rooney is a good for you book. I'm gonna put it somewhere like here or like here. I think I might actually put it like somewhere here. Yeah, once again, it reminds me a little bit of My Year of Rest and Relaxation and Magnolia Parks, where it's just a little bit controversial. It's either love or hate, no really in between. And I love it. Some people hate it, and that's that. They have Powerless, which I'm going to say, what possessed you to recommend this? I've been seeing nothing but like 5 stars for this book, saying that it's like the best thing since sliced bread, the best slow burn romance, an amazing fantasy fiction. And then I started reading it, and it was just a really, really poorly written copy of The Hunger Games. And if you want to read something like The Hunger Games with slow burn romance, just read The Hunger Games. And it actually made me reread The Hunger Games and realize just how amazing those books were and still are. And coincidentally, Susan Collins is releasing more books, so I think this was all meant to happen. She's coming back to save the world of literature. I don't know what possessed anyone to recommend Powerless, and I don't know how more books of this series are being released. But when I posted my last video about me DNFing Powerless, a lot of you guys said that you're glad that I'm speaking out on it because you guys also hated it. Okay, then we have Punk 57. I'm going to put that into I was ovulating, because that's what it was. And then I realized that it was like a end of high school type book where they're kind of like 18-ish, but that is almost too young for me. I don't want to read about books. I don't want to read smutty books in high school because I'm not in high school anymore. Whereas I think this is like made for someone in high school. It was a fine book, but nothing to write home about. And I did feel uncomfortable about them being in high school because I just don't like reading that like age bracket anymore, because I'm like so far removed from it. So that's where I'm going to put that. I'm actually going to, it's almost like no comment, but like not really, because I didn't hate the book. But then I don't know, I guess I'll just put that there. And then we have Riley Sager, who I've read 2 books from. I've read Lock Every Door, which I actually really enjoyed on audio. As you guys can tell, I love listening to mystery and thrillers on audio because I think they're like a lot more enjoyable, entertaining. But then I started reading The House Across the Lake, and I DNF'd it because it was so boring. I don't know, like the beginning was fine, and then it just, I don't know, just dragged a little bit, and I just didn't get it. Like I just don't understand. Not like I didn't get the plot. It's not like rocket science, but I was just, I don't care. Like quite frankly, I just don't care. So I'm gonna just say no comment and just put it like at the top of no comment. I know people have had an issue with Riley Sager because he's picked a very like gender neutral name that sounds very feminine, and a lot of women write thriller mystery books, and so he's definitely trying to appeal to the female audience of mystery thriller books, because mainly women read mystery thrillers and listen to true crime as well. And then he ends up writing these main characters who are unreliable, mentally ill a lot of the time, or like alcoholics or something, who can't be trusted. And that's his whole plot twist, will be like, this woman was actually crazy all along. And that's just not really anyone's favorite vibe. And if it was like in 1 book or 2, it'd be fine. But apparently it's just like a constant. And even with this book, The House Across the Lake, I was noticing it. Like he was painting the main character to be unreliable. She drinks a lot, and she's this like ex-starlet, like retired starlet, who had to be sent off to rehab, and she clearly can't be trusted about what she's seeing. And so I just didn't really care about how that book was going to end. And that's why I DNF'd it. And I'm going to put Riley Sager into no comment. With The Silent Patient, shouldn't reread. I'm going to put it kind of high up on shouldn't reread, because I think I enjoyed it in the moment, but now looking back on it, it actually wasn't as great as everyone hyped it up to be. And so I'm just going to put it into shouldn't reread, because for your sake, whoever wrote this book, I shouldn't reread it. Then we have The Hating Game, which was highly recommended, and then I read it, and it was supposed to be like a enemies to lovers type book, but they're literally not enemies. They just don't like each other and they work in the same workplace. Like, there's no stakes to this. Shouldn't reread, but like somewhere here. Shouldn't reread, because I think at the time I gave it like a 3 or 4, maybe 3. Now it would probably be like a 2. It's kind of, you know what I mean? Like, it's just not the best. They have The Unhoneymooners, and me and this book hate each other. I hate this book. If I see you, it's on site, okay? Not Christina Lauren, like, I just mean like if I see this book, it's on site. I'm gonna put this into no comment. I hated the main male character. It was a miscommunication book trope at the beginning, but the miscommunication made no sense to me. And after what the main male character pulled off in the last third of the book, I couldn't root for them anymore. So I was just like, right, I'm done. Like, I hate this book and I hate these characters. And then we have Verity, which I'm gonna put into good for you, but somewhere like maybe here. It's actually my favorite Colleen Hoover book. A lot of people have like a love-hate relationship with it. I actually quite like it. I felt it was different for Colleen, and I feel like she should lean into this a little bit more, because I actually think she's quite good at this. And when you give toxic, abusive couples, she usually will romanticize them in her romance books, obviously, but in this book, you weren't supposed to romanticize them or root for them. So it almost felt like it fit more the kind of characters that she writes. That's what I think anyway. This is how I rate all of these books. My biggest category is good for you, luckily. Luckily, I enjoy a lot of the stuff that gets recommended to me. There's actually not a lot in what possessed you to recommend this, and no comment is quite small as well. It's my second smallest tier. So actually from here to here, I'm like happy with that. I'm happy with the kind of recommendations I've gotten over the years. It's not been all bad. I know everyone complains about BookTok and BookTube, but actually I've gotten quite a lot of recommendations that have been amazing and life-changing and incredible. So if this is not proof, then I don't know what is. That you can still get good recommendations online for books that will fit your taste if you just cater your recommended and for you to your taste. And yeah, let me know what you guys think about my rankings or anything else. Subscribe with the bell icon for engagement. I'll see you guys in my next one. Bye guys.